Thank everybody for coming out this afternoon. We have a busy day. We've done a budget workshop, and now we're on to our regular agenda. Some pretty big topics on the agenda. I expect this thing to run a little long, so we'll try to get through it the best way we can. We'll start with the invocation and the pledge. Ms. Voss, let the record show we call this meeting to order on June the 19th at exactly 3:01 p.m. Our pledge and invocation will be given by Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. Thank you. Pastor Barbara Wanier of the New Life United Methodist Church, we've invited to lead us in the prayer. And Dr. Wanier, if you would please come this time. Would you all please stand?
Let us pray. Almighty Sustainer and Creator, we pause at this time to offer thanks for being able to assemble in this County Commission meeting here in Tallahassee, Florida. We invoke your presence as we know that the wisdom of these men and women is sufficient, but not sufficient enough to solitarily handle the many challenges that Leon County faces. Yet these commissioners have been elected to serve your people through their decisions. On their behalf, I pray for humility as they acknowledge your greatness to guide them in this meeting. Grant them insight for the direction they need to take as a board of commissioners. We pray that just as you have given guidance to the commissioners in the past, that you guide these men and women as they address today's agenda items. Help them weigh their words and remember what is said is recorded in history. Should disagreements or anger arise, lift these commissioners above it by the confidence that they have been called to serve for just such a time as this. When each of these commissioners reach the close of this meeting, let them leave this place trusting that what they have done is well with their souls. Let them leave here feeling encouraged that their decisions were not stillborn, but vital, filled with life and utility. Let them leave here trusting that their collective ideas have pushed Leon County forward and that your will has been done. We pray this prayer by your mercy and grace. Amen.
Amen. Shall we repeat the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. We'll start the agenda with a proclamation. I don't believe this is the one I'm supposed to give. Mr. Vice Chair, if you could, what proclamation am I giving?
Pardon me?
What proclamation am I giving based off of the representation?
Mr. Chairman, that would be Leon County Legacy Communities.
That's not what I have. Okay. Leon County Legacy Communities. Let me read this proclamation. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Whereas the history of Leon County is entrenched in the economic contribution of African American slaves when on March 30th, 1822, Florida became an organized territory of the United States and allowed slavery. And whereas in 1860, Leon County was both the center of the Florida slave trade and of Florida's plantation industry, slaves constituted 73% of the population, and their value was greater than all of the land of the county. And whereas we honor the contributions of slaves and their descendants from the legacy communities of Leon County who have made unimaginable sacrifices for our economic well-being, cultural fiber, and rich heritage. And whereas some of these descendants include Dr. Sandra Harris Thompson, founder and chief executive officer of the Legacy Communities of North Florida Incorporated, and faculty member in the Cooperative Extension Program at Florida A&M University, responsible for the Community Resource Development Program area. Doris Harris Malloy, Leon County tax collector, and Cynthia Gale Gaines, retired school teacher. And whereas Leon County recognizes legacy communities of Leon County, Florida, including Olivia, Barrow, Avalia, thank you. Avalia, Barrow Hill, Bel Air, Blocker, Bloxham, Bradfordville, Buck Lake, Buse Quarters, Capitola, Chairs, Concord, Coon Bottom, Dawkins Pond, Edgewood, Frenchtown, Hammock, Hickory Hill, Ammonia, Kirksey, Lake Hall, Lake Overstreet, Maclay, Miccosukee, Oak, Orchard Pond, Rock Hill, Rollins Point, Smoky Hollow, St. Peter, Skitter Hole, I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, St. Augustine Road, Tall Timbers, Union Branch, Waysboro, Testarini, Wawani, and Woodville. And whereas the County of Leon supports the legacy communities of North Florida Incorporated in staging the first Juke Joint Jam Florida Festival to recognize and celebrate the historic role African Americans served as forced labor in building Florida's original agrarian plantation economy, and further acknowledges the protective role that Florida's Seminole Nation played in sheltering slaves and resulting integration of cultures for survival. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Leon County Board of County Commissioners do hereby proclaim our support of the Juke Joint Jam Florida Festival and do hereby proclaim June 2nd, 2018 as Legacy Communities of Leon County Day. This signed by myself as well as the rest of the commissioners and attested to by the county administrator. Come on up.
Would somebody tell us when the festival is before you step aside?
Mr. Chairman, when is the juke jump going to jump? Say that real fast. The juke joint is going to jump.
Mike.
We held the festival on June 2nd, 2018 at Orchard Pond. That was our first one. And we are holding the second one on June 29th, 2019. We thank the county for the resources in helping us on our first one, and we look forward to the partnership in 2019. And look forward to seeing everyone there. Yes. Thank you.
One more picture. You good? You good?
Mr. Vice Chair, you might comment? I just wanted to, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one who met with Sandra and Jeff Phipps talking about legacy communities, but I just wanted to appreciate you, Sandra, you and your organization for not just the event, but really lifting up this important issue. And as we talked about, the timing was pretty incredible, thinking about what we're focused on in Miccosukee right now in the old Concord School. That's a really great example, and a lot of what we were already doing dovetails with what you were thinking, your dissertation and your work and all of that. So really appreciate it. Look forward to working with you more. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to just say that I was overlooked for the juke joint jump, and I'm hopeful that next year on the 29th of 20, y'all count a brother in, you know. Our family grew up on Phipps Plantation, so we feel like we was in there. We know what to do when we get to the party. That's what I'm trying to say.
Do you know how to dance?
Oh, is the Pope Catholic? We know what to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Frotner. Commissioner Dozier, you said your piece, correct? Okay. All right. Any more comments from commissioners? I have no more commissioners to speak. All right. Thank you. We'll move on now to our sheriff coming to give us an update. Sheriff McNeil, floor is yours, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, first of all, let me start by saying how much I appreciate the opportunity to work with each of you, and goes without saying, Vince Long, your chairman, is just a tremendous manager, and we have enjoyed the relationship and his staff. Alan does an outstanding job of working with David Folsom in terms of our budget, and quite honestly, any issue that we think is important, we make sure we talk to Alan and to Vince about. So, Mr. Chairman, just to say how much your county manager works, I wanted you to know that.
Thank you, sir.
The issue of crime, quite honestly, is obviously an ongoing issue and concern for the citizens of Leon County. We have made what some might say are significant strides, but there is quite a bit to be done. I'm sure you've read and seen that our crime rate is down by some 14%. In the unincorporated parts of Leon County, it's down by something close to 18%. I'm told that those percentages represent a 5-year low in terms of our crime problems, and we hope that we've got it going in the right direction. One of the things that we have continued to say about crime in our community is that we simply cannot expect to arrest our way out of this problem that has lingered for quite some time. There are a number of initiatives that we've begun in the Leon County Sheriff's Office that we've reaped some benefits from. The least of those not being the relationships that we continue to carve out with our partners at TPD and other state and local agencies, to include Florida State University and FAMU. You should know that some of the discussions we've had have focused on the use of technology as a way of leveraging our resources to be more effective. And I am here this afternoon to share with you that we are full steam ahead with the efforts we're making to bring online, hopefully in July, a real-time crime center. And what that basically means is that we're going to leverage cameras and CTV cameras all across our community. I am happy to say that Florida State University will be unveiling some 20 to 40 cameras on their campus that when we kick off our crime center, we'll have access to. And we hope to continue to have conversations with the city of Tallahassee to have access to their cameras as well. We believe it's been shown to be very successful in other communities, and we believe that is true for us here in Leon County as well. We have organized ourselves around several initiatives, all kind of wrapped up around the affirmation that you've all heard, which is all in. And all in basically means that the law enforcement community can't do these things by themselves. It's going to require this entire community engaged in understanding those things that cause crime, and then allow us to leverage technology and resources to try to address the crime we face. We have changed some of our delivery systems. For example, we partnered with the Tallahassee Police Department and created a property crimes task force. That task force, I can tell you, has been extremely successful. Our property crime rates, I think Chief Undersheriff Folsom handed you a document, and in that you will see that some of our property crimes are down, I may get these numbers wrong, but by about 34% in terms of property crimes going down. Auto burglaries are down. Home burglaries are down. Larcenies are down, in large part because we focused on those because we knew that those were the prime drivers of our crime increases throughout our community. And so we will continue to leverage those assets. We also have been working with the Florida Highway Patrol. You may have seen our kickoff of the All-In operation, All-In. We partner with Florida Highway Patrol, working specifically on drug and addiction in our community, knowing that we still have pockets of drug activity, particularly on the south side of our community, and they were very successful in assisting us in driving some of that crime out of our community, and that also helped in terms of driving down our crime. We will continue that effort. We just kicked off something we call Deputies Without Borders, and that involves not only the Florida Highway Patrol, but all of the sheriffs in our region, Wakulla County, Gaston County, Liberty County, Franklin County, and Jefferson County. And we go all the way down to Perry as well. Again, we realize that crime knows no boundaries, and the persons committing crimes in Gaston County often come into Leon County, and we've got to share information about who those persons are and then work together to try to bring those persons to justice. And so we'll be kicking that off and continuing that effort, and we'll let you know how that goes. I guess the last thing I want to say to you is these problems of crime, while we've got them going in the right direction, cannot be sustained unless we have some changes as it relates to the very causes of crime in our community. And I don't think it's lost on any of you that you have seen the reports that say that some 41% of our community live at or below the poverty level when you include the ALICE report as a part of that number of persons. And that, in fact, drives some of our crime issues. We are doing everything that we can in the Leon County Sheriff's Office. Just about every youth program in our community, the Leon County Sheriff's Office have been taking dollars from our drug forfeiture funds and pouring into those organizations, trying to give them the assets they need to get these kids off the streets and engaged in productive activities. We would like to see some efforts in terms of, I heard someone say that, Sheriff, because you were in the Department of Corrections, you know full well that the third grade reading level is a predictor of where persons are going to wind up, if they're going to wind up in our prison systems. And that, in fact, was a barometer that we used in the past. I'm not sure if they do it today. But I will say to you here, Commissioners, that we must come up with a plan that focuses on how we deal with the youth of our community, how we ensure that our kids have a future that doesn't simply put them in a situation where they are victimized by gang members and persons in our community involved in drugs and other criminal activities. Oftentimes, they find those to be the role models in some aspects of our community, and we can change that circumstance if we can collectively and unifiedly come up with a plan. So, Commissioners, I will stop there and respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. I start off by saying that you're doing a terrific job. I'm very impressed with the things that you've done thus far and the results we're getting from those things. And I know this board stands ready to help you out any way we can in your efforts to try to lower the crime rate, and even in your efforts to even try to help us deal with some of the youth problems that we have here in Leon County. So I want to lead off by saying thank you for your efforts and tell you we are a partner that's willing to help in any way we can. I have Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Daly, and queue to speak. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, we thank you so much for your presence today. I represent a district that doesn't exactly get excited about the theme support your local sheriff. I think that was thematic some years ago, support the local sheriff. But I must say that at street level, the responses that I've heard about your office and your leadership have been very positive. So I commend you and just convey what I'm hearing at street level. It's pretty decent. Sheriff, I appreciate that yours is not a lock them up and throw away the key to law enforcement. And Commissioners, if we have heard the Sheriff consistently, he's indicated and touched a number of what you might call soft programs, and connecting the dots of the soft programs that are very vibrant, what can make a difference, but may not be perceived as the hardcore law enforcement stuff of old school. I think that the call for collaboration in recognizing the social dynamics that are important, which lend themselves to crime, if not addressed, is very, very important. And I think that we're going to probably have a discussion in this room tonight around 6 o'clock that may highlight some of those emphases as well. I wanted to ask specifically on your budget, Sheriff, and I've looked at 18, and I have both 18 and 19 here with me. And your call for 4 additional deputies actually is the first increase from 1999 to 2017. So at the peak period of our spiking up with record levels of criminality in this community, we've not had additional officers, and your budget for 19 is the first quantitative increase of officers to address it. Could you respond to that and help us for the public to appreciate what this would do?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. The issue, quite honestly, isn't one of volume as it relates to our resources. The issue from my perspective is how do we effectively utilize resources and how do we deploy our resources. I have intentionally gauged our request from you as a commission in such a way that I believe makes us as effective as we possibly can without at the same time trying to break the back of the citizens of Leon County. With our crime rate as high as it has been, I could perhaps, and it could be justified, come in and asking for 20 deputies or more. But that wouldn't serve us, nor would it serve you. I can't hire that many deputies at the rate that we try to bring people and the training that's associated with that. So we have intentionally asked for the number of deputies that we can bring on board successfully and get them through our process with the kind of outcomes that we believe we should have. Now, that hinges, quite honestly, on our being smart and leveraging the other assets in our community. That's why you see us partnering with Florida Highway Patrol. That's why you see us working with the other deputies from other counties in our community and working with TPD. We gave TPD for the first time in my career, the 40 years or so, right at 40 years I've been in law enforcement, we gave the Tallahassee Police the opportunity to pursue crimes in the unincorporated parts of our county. Again, being more effective with the assets and resources that we have. So we could foreseeably be asking for more, but I think we have to leverage and utilize the assets we have as effectively as we possibly can, and that's my responsibility.
Excellent. Sheriff, your budget indicates that the SRO contract is a $1.5 million, and it's in parentheses. Does that mean that the school district pays for the law enforcement presence at the schools, or is this what the county is supplying to pay for SRO personnel to be at our public schools?
What we've done is that the additional staff for the schools is not being picked up by the county. We had an arrangement in previous years where the county would pick up 50% of the cost, and the school board would pick the other 50% up. We are not continuing that arrangement as we go forward.
What does that mean to us? We're picking up some new monies that the school board is going to pay for that fully? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the school board would pay for the additional staffing fully, whether it's us or someone else.
And we understand that legislative funding out of the special session and following after the shootings in South Florida, that new monies are coming out, and that should relieve our county, should it not?
No. Well, that's not a decision I'm engaged in terms of how the school board uses their monies or how the county then subsidizes that.
Commissioner Pryor, as I understand it, we continue to pay the half of the officers that we were already paying for. The new officers that have come online, the school district will pay 100% of the cost of that. So we do still pay for that half that we paid prior to the state mandating that all elementary schools have officers, resource officers.
Okay, very good. My last point, Sheriff, because lots of people want to ask you something here. Your closing statement indicates that approximately 1/3 of the 1,100 daily inmates are experiencing symptoms or have been diagnosed with serious mental health issues. The Alice report, and when we had that meeting here, there was absolutely no projection for enlarging the mental health service for mid-level 4, 5, 6, 7 levels for our community up until 2034. With you housing and running the largest mental health facility in North Florida, could you perhaps speak or say something about a need? Because when we were last dealt with data before us, there's nothing on the horizon for mental health. But your comments to us indicate that you begin intensive steps to observe suicides, which we had a well-publicized situation last year that occurred at the jail, and that you're training deputies in the techniques that recognize people who are having mental health crisis versus inmates who are being disobedient to law enforcement, and to recognize disobedience versus somebody having a crisis. And I really respect and appreciate that. And the third component that you have indicated to us, that you've increased access of treatment practitioners coming into the area. So I'm appreciative of those steps, but I was just pondering if there's anything that you could say to this body publicly, there are need for yours to not be the largest continuous mental health facility in North Florida.
Well, certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Certainly, we would not like to continue in that vein. Obviously, if there were other mental health institutions that were available, we would certainly love to have those persons take avail of that opportunity. However, that's not the case in most instances. In fact, most of these persons are being incarcerated in our detention facility for some type of crime that they've committed. So what we have done is we have partnered with and contracted with Corizon, our medical provider. We have also contracted with and are in almost daily dialogue with Appalachian Mental Health. We have changed our protocol as it relates to how persons come into our detention facility with Appalachian Mental Health on the front end, in the middle, and then again on the back end, as a checks and balance, if you will, for the services that are being provided by our private provider and working with our partners here at Appalachian Mental Health and Jay Reeves. We think that is a significant improvement in our delivery of mental health services. Is it exactly what we would absolutely want? Perhaps not, but it moves us, I think, closer to having a full circle of services that will hopefully keep us from having outcomes that you just spoke of in terms of suicides.
Very good. I yield the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Prado, Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Daly, and the Vice Chair Jackson, and queue to speak. Real quick before I recognize you, Commissioner Dozier. Mr. Sheriff, this is very nice. I don't know if commissioners had an opportunity to look through this. This is the first time I've seen something like this come to us since I've been on this commission. I was wondering if we could have some of these delivered over to the county administration office for us to leave out front for people to take a gander. I don't know if you produced them in math. This is something I think the public would appreciate seeing, and very nice document.
We'll make sure of that.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here. One of my questions wasn't really a question. You and I have talked about the progress you've made on mental health, and I wanted you to be able to have an opportunity to dig into that, so I'm glad Commissioner Proctor brought that up. I echo the Chair's comments. I think the presentation is great, and I think we can't leave your comment about being efficient with the resources you have and looking first to the partnerships and to being efficient before looking to a budget request. that is not something, let's be honest, that is typical in local, state, federal governments across the nation, probably across the world. That's what we should be doing. I think that's what we try to do, and just really appreciate the partnership. And I know you've worked closely with County Administrator and the Deputy and your staff has, to get the budget in the right place. There was a lot of things that you needed, new vehicles, things like that. We need to partner on this, and I'm really excited about that. So there's so many things, as you articulated, that you could talk about. I do want to also say we just started the Children's Service Council public hearing, so thank you for that, right, unannounced, but appreciate your early comments on that. But just as an example, and then a question related to this, you and I have had a lot of conversations and some meeting with some folks talking about coordination for services upon reentering our community, whether it's folks leaving the detention center or prison, but mostly focused on the detention center. I was inspired by a conversation we had last summer, and by the time we followed up, you had a new hire, you've got new programs, you've moved very quickly on this. And I think what we saw was just getting people in the room together helps, and there's more steps we need to take. I know you've also worked with other board members on a lot of different initiatives, so with that as the example, how could we do better to coordinate, whether it's the public entities with our nonprofits, to make sure the various boards, the PSCC, others, that we all know what we're doing so that we can do a better job of leveraging those resources. I think we got a great start, and that's why I wanted to say all that in the beginning, but I would love to give you the opportunity to share any thoughts about how we could keep pushing this forward.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Dozier, and since you asked, I will jump directly into that. My background, when I was in college, I was a juvenile justice focused criminology student, and what I see in our community, in large part, are gaps in delivery of services as relates to the youth of our community. So I have, if I had say about how we go about trying to address these problems, we'd be doing two things. Since I spent some time in our prison systems for the state of Florida and was involved in what I think is perhaps a model for the state in terms of reentry in Jacksonville, if we could do two things. If we could stand up and get together and develop some strategies around how we deal with the issues of the 1,000 persons who come back in our community every year from prison, and build a reentry component that looks something like what they built in Jacksonville, but obviously built the way our community would love to see it work, where we could start to turn around the lives of some of those persons coming back. The second strategy that I'm sure we'll have some more discussion tonight at 6 is strategies around the youth of our community. I am, quite honestly, often just puzzled by the realities when I saw the Alice report and the economic report and the projections in terms of what our future looks like for the kids of our community. To me, it would be negligence on our behalf not to step into the breach and start to try to come up with a plan that tries to address those problems and build some capacity by which we can start addressing those problems that we all see. And that, again, for me, it means rolling up our sleeves, getting to work, and building the system and build the strategies and the plan to make those two things happen. And if those things happen, I believe, and quite honestly, I can't say enough what I said at the very outset, which is make no bones about it. I'm your sheriff, and I'm going to arrest everybody I can arrest that's committing crimes in our community. But I can tell you they're just going to keep walking in and back out because of the circumstances they find themselves in. But we can change that. I believe we can absolutely change that here in Leon County. I hope I answered your question.
You absolutely did, sir, and I appreciate that. You do have a lot of experience in this area, and for us, we have been interested in funding, and we did fund recently, Ready for Work, and looking at these issues. And I know we've all touched on this. Others of you have worked with various people within law enforcement community and the judicial system on different issues. I would really like to elevate the reentry question, maybe bring some of the information we've got from these different resources into, I don't know if it would be a workshop or an agenda item in the future. I would be open to either. We could, get some recommendations from the county administrator and the sheriff, but I would like for us to find a way to look at the reentry question holistically, because it's not just an issue that your department needs to focus on, nor an issue that the county government can solve. This takes a collaborative approach. That's when we're helping people who've already been in the system, and I don't think it's lost on anyone that probably costs more than efforts to help children. So while we're improving individual lives on both ends, this is a whole community issue. So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it to your discretion. I can bring that back up in comment time. I'd love to hear from others, but I really would like for us to look at that reentry question and a possible center in collaboration with our partners at some point in the near future.
Chairman, I want to dive on the wagon and weight it down. I support that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate it.
I do have Commissioner Daley and Commissioner Jackson in queue to speak, but after the final speaker speaks, Commissioner Dozier, if you want to present a motion to that effect, I'll be willing to entertain it. Commissioner Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Sheriff, thank you so much for coming out. And,
thank you, sir.
I am proud to stand with the men and women of Green, Leon County Sheriff's Office. Y'all do a tremendous job, and I really enjoy working with you personally and with every member of your office as well. A couple of my colleagues have already referenced, and I'd like to talk about it as well. Tonight, at the public hearing, we'll be talking specifically about the creation of a Children's Services Council, which I brought up and I wholeheartedly support. What I am hearing in the community, though, and I think if I can read tea leaves, is that the direction that we'll take is not necessarily towards the 2018 ballot, but for a future initiative to give the community more time to come together and actually put a plan together and to move forward. And this is a process that I wholeheartedly embrace and look forward to supporting this evening as well. I was going to ask, and you kind of have already alluded to it, but I didn't know if you planned on coming back this evening. I thought I'd save you the time. You are here. If you would like to comment specifically on the proposal that will be for us this evening. But more importantly, if this body does decide to look at more of a long-term vision towards the Children's Services Council and not the 2018 ballot. But we truly come together to put a plan. I am taking from your comments today that, not to steal your term, you are all in and would like to have a seat at the table, obviously, to help us convene this plan for a possible future ballot initiative. Any comments?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And you read me exactly right. I am in full support of the Children's Services Council. I don't necessarily have to have a seat, but I would not turn one down if one were offered. And I do believe that we have to, and I understand the angst that many of our citizens have about not having a plan and not understanding how the dollars are going to be spent. But I think there are some steps, perhaps, that we can all talk about that allow us to deal with the issue now and perhaps get it on the ballot at some point in time. But I think the discussion has been healthy. I think that it's gotten everybody talking about this issue, which I really appreciate. And hopefully, as I continue to say, right now the only tool we have to deal with these issues in our community is a stick, and that stick is law enforcement. And we need to change that dynamic. And I believe planning and getting together in some collaboration and coming up with some strategies is where we need to be. And that's what I will come back tonight because I promised some folks that I would be back tonight, the folks that support this, and I'll go into more detail about my belief and why I believe we should move ahead. Perhaps not for August, but we certainly should try to put this on the ballot.
I agree. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Commissioner Daley. Mr. Vice Chair.
Sheriff Neal, I'll be redundant and say thank you again for coming out this afternoon. And I do want to bring up a statistic that you used, an 18% drop in unincorporated communities. I think we all know that criminals don't really pay attention to city limit signs and certain neighborhoods or those sorts of warnings or neighborhood watch systems. So the work that they've done in those unincorporated communities has been very visible and has been very apparent, in particular in the District 2 communities that I represent. I thought it was interesting to note. I enjoyed the awesome booklet here, this data book that your staff put together. Nearly a 40, or actually a 42% drop in burglaries in Leon County, which is a pretty amazing number from 2016 to 17, and probably the most impactful statistic. Any change in violent crimes in the right direction is important to me. And there's nearly an 8% drop in violent crimes committed in our community, and that is certainly a commendation to your staff as well as your leadership. So thank you again for the booklet, and thank you for your service. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have Commissioner Proctor, but Commissioner Proctor, before you start, Commissioner Dozier, you had a couple of things I was going to hit later. Specifically, I'm excited about not only did you rename the jail to a detention facility, but the attitude and the programs you have within it, the new ones that you have are pointed more towards rehabilitation than anything. Particularly, if you could speak particularly about the reentry fair, I think that's an interesting thing. I hadn't heard about it prior to seeing it in his book. The Career Source Job Club, and then the transition class. Those are new programs, as I see it in this book. Could you talk just a little bit about those?
Yes. We're doing the best we can as relates to reentry of folks that we have in our detention facility. And what our staff has done is brought in persons who are engaged, like Career Source, who are employers, and we're matching the employers up with our inmates who are coming back in the community and giving them an opportunity to sit down and talk about with potential employers about what their skills are and when they will be back, and what they can be working on while they're incarcerated. We believe that if we demonstrate to people, let me digress a minute and say, we also had a GED graduation in our detention facility where we actually had a ceremony where they marched and had their caps and gowns and that kind of thing. Bringing dignity to persons who are incarcerated and giving them the opportunity to be valued is substantial, and it starts the wheels rolling in terms of, yes, I am and can be a vital part of our community. And that's the message we're trying to send as well. One of the things that they do in Jacksonville at the Reentry Center to be dynamic about this is we have law enforcement on one side of the room and service providers on the other side of the room, and we say to the inmates, look, if you want to go back into the life of crime, here are the police officers, the deputies, we'll be there and we'll lock your butt up. But if you want to go back and get your life back together, here's some folks here that will help you. And that's the message we're trying to get across through the programming that we're bringing to the detention facility. And that's why it's so important that our community embrace detention facility and our staff embrace detention facility, because we want to be more than just a place that warehouses people. We want to be a place that tries to bring dignity back to persons who are entering back into our communities.
That's pretty awesome.
About 80% of them come back. Some go on to Department of Correction, but even those come back.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Proctor.
Thanks, Chairman. Sheriff, you said something I thought was rather profound, and I didn't know you were going to be here tonight, and I captured it that I might quote you later, but I thought you said, if I heard you correctly, it would be negligence on our parts to not step into the breach and build some capacity to address the problems affecting our children. I thought that was profound, and I hope that you repeat that note tonight. Finally, Sheriff, I wanted to say that in the area of leadership and diversity, we had a fabulous budget workshop this morning, and we actually received commendations from the county administrator, who said that it was a pretty intellectual, moral, cultural deep dive, that we looked at the notion of pay, gender pay equity, and we're looking at our own organization. I'm encouraging you to look at yours, that women on your staff are not marginalized, and that what Florida represents, according to what we received this morning, that women receive something like 87 cents to the dollar of what a male earns. And while we found that our organization stands a little different from Florida and the rest of our community. We're hopeful that the sheriff unit will be lockstep with Leon County. And then sheriff diversity and leadership. And at some point in recent years, we had reached, I thought, something that was reflective of our community numbers in terms of the majors, the captains, and persons in leadership. And I think that I think that though an important achievement that our sheriff is an African American, I think that institutional building, and I might use your word, to build some capacity for leadership beyond your tenure, that it's important that we have continue to build on the legacy that we've seen majors, African American captains and stuff like that. And while I'm not asking you to comment on it, I just trust that your commitment to that area is very special and cutting edge commitment as well. Those are concerns that as a taxpayer I have. It's a concern for which, when we think of the integrity of the persons who are reflective of decision making about justice issues, our community respects and is more apt to think of fairness in law enforcement when there's diversity in leadership ranks. So I encourage that as well to be a goal of the sheriff.
Well, thank you. And I will comment and simply say that succession planning is a huge part of leadership. And we in the Leon County Sheriff's Office have embarked upon succession planning, and to make sure that the Leon County Sheriff's Office is representative of the citizens of Leon County at every level. And so we're working to make that a reality.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to let the public know, this actually also indicates a further another step in the partnership between the administration and the sheriff's office. I believe I forget who asked for it, but back during our retreat, we asked for the sheriff to come twice a year. And the sheriff was gracious enough to come stand before us now and also before our retreat, correct, to talk about what's going on in his shop so we can further plan better how we can help him. And so, Mr. Sheriff, I know you're a busy man. I want to thank you for doing those things for us and for relaying this great information to us so we can be better partners to you. Commissioner Dozier, you wanted to bring up something about reentry. The county administrator did remind me that the PSCC did just allocate some dollars for reentry and that they could bring back a status report. But if we wanted to take a deeper dive into it, that we could look at either a workshop or an agenda item. If we do that, I actually would also like to look at some of the programs that I mentioned that the sheriff is already doing in the detention center to see how we can even further help him expand upon those things that he's already doing, because I think they're great ideas what he's doing. So the motion the floor is yours to make a motion or to go with a status, whether to go with a status report, a workshop, or an agenda item.
Mr. Chair, I would defer to Sheriff McNeil and the county administrator in part on this. While the conversation has been developing, I was actually going to suggest putting a pause. I'm glad to raise the issue, putting a pause on this, having some conversations and coming back in July and introducing how we might approach that. The Ready for Work grant, it was a great program, way to support that one program. What we're talking about is a coordinated effort where someone leaving the detention center would be able to access whatever resources they need and be connected with those nonprofits. It is similar to what the Continuum of Care offers for the homeless assistance programs, the nonprofits in our community. Right. So looking to you, Sheriff and Mr. County Administrator, I think we would benefit by some conversations, and then I could bring this back up in July. Would that work for both of you?
Yes.
Okay. But if that works for the board, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opening, and I'm glad there is interest in looking at this area. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. I'm really interested, too, in celebrating those who come out and are able to find employment, or even those who have the GED program. So if you can make sure that your staff sends over when you have those graduations, or even if you have ceremonies where those who do are able to come out and find an employment, I'll be very interested in coming to celebrate that with those folks.
Thank you. We'll
Thank you, sir.
Make a note of that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
All right. That was a lengthy discussion, but well worth it. Great information we just received there. We'll move now to consent. Mr. Administrator, any consent items pulled?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, as reflected in your revised agenda, we have items 13 and 15 that have been pulled from consent.
Move the balance, Mr. Chairman.
The remainder of consent has been moved by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 13.
Item number 13 is a proposed extension of contracted services with Scott Carswell Presents, LLC. We are recommending that this contract be extended, and this item was pulled by Commissioner Dozier.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the last time we reviewed this contract, I am going to recuse myself, and because I know our county attorney loves it, I'm going to put my language for my recusal form into the record. So I am recusing myself from my consent item number 13, the contract services with Scott Carswell Presents, LLC, for professional services and management of the Amphitheater Concert Series at Cascades Park. Scott Carswell is my father's first cousin. I'm thrilled about that. And although I don't believe there is any direct conflict of interest for sure, due to our family relationship, as always, I understand there may be an appearance of a conflict, so I'm going to recuse myself from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Daly and Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly appreciate it. Mr. Administrator, is there any reason why we should not extend the contract? Have there been any known problems that have been brought to your attention with services that have been provided?
No, there is not. It's our strong recommendation that the contract be extended.
I have been very pleased with Mr. Carswell's performance with the amphitheater. I mean, we got it off the ground. We brought in some great acts. We've had incredible turnout. It is a community jewel. It is enjoyed and loved by Tallahassee. And my only regret is he still has not been able to secure Journey.
What?
You know, when
What's the problem?
I need you to keep working on it, Mr. Carswell. I'm telling you. But I will make the staff recommendation in the form of a motion.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Daly to extend the contract or go with staff recommendation. Has been seconded by Commissioner Deloge. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
On the issue of recusal, Mr. County Attorney, I want to reveal that Scott Carswell is my brother of a different mother. Would I need to recuse myself as such?
Not for that.
Yes, sir. Okay, good.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Daly, you had you're lobbying for Journey. I'm lobbying for Outcast. I'm not even sure I can support the motion on the floor tonight because I have gotten. No, I'm just kidding. Scott, great job. Continue to do a great job for us, and we look forward to the action bringing in the future. Motion on the floor is for staff recommendation. Motion made by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Dozier recusing herself. We'll move now to item number 15. Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 15 is a status report on our upcoming 2019 Created Equal event. The board asked that this come back at that time when we presented and the board approved the format for this event. There was some conversation about the availability of free tickets and some alternative approaches to the event. This item, I think, addresses the concerns that came up, and it was pulled by our chairman, Commissioner Maddox.
Yeah, I want to expound upon why, but I'm just not going to be able to support the motion for staff recommendation on this one. I think it's going to be a great event. I wish the Village Square and the Symphony luck in putting it on, but I can't support a staff recommendation here today. I also want to make sure that I consult with the county attorney as Commissioner Daly does when we're used to when we have votes pertaining to Appalachia Mental Health Center. Mr. Attorney, I am a non-paid member of the board for the Symphony. Does that present a conflict for me?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion from the commission. Commissioner Daly?
Staff recommendation for option number 1.
Staff recommendation been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Lindley. Yes, sir.
On the issue of these free and reduced tickets, my question is, are we free of any ethics conflicts? Mr. County Attorney, I saw this and I trembled, but I know you had looked at it, so I was wondering.
There are no issues, Commissioner.
Okay, very good.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm curious about your concerns. I feel very strongly that this program is really good, and in fact, I was convinced over the holidays, and I'm glad we were able to take this item up, having learned even more about it since then and seen the partnership between TSO and Village Square. All of our folks are here. Thank you all. They have done a tremendous amount of work in recent months, and I wondered if, since the item was pulled, and we are going to be sponsors, if we could hear just a little bit from Mandy and or Liz about things that have happened just recently. I think just this last week, and Mandy, you might have learned how this Ode to Understanding is getting some national recognition. And I would like to hear a little bit more about that if the Chair and the Board, Mr. Chair, would you be willing?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, everyone in this room needs to be very proud of themselves for what we've accomplished so far with this project. And by the way, I wanted to start by saying that our Chair, Martha Olive Hall, could not be here today. She wanted me to apologize. Her mother died and they had a service this morning. But she wanted everyone to know that the board and staff and musicians in partnership with Village Square are working hand in hand on this. And so her not being here is no symbol of any sort. We were just at our National League of American Orchestras conference in Chicago last week, which has 1,000 people at it each year. And the whole topic and the whole focus was on diversity and inclusion. And we, as a symphony in Tallahassee, got national recognition for this project. They are so impressed with what we're doing. And I put one of these on each of your desks. This is our newest magazine, trade magazine that comes out. It goes to 56,000 people. And they give, in the little, I bookmarked it for you, a shout out to the work Tallahassee's doing. And they say, in places from New York to Tallahassee, this very progressive work is happening. And so all week long, we had people coming up to us saying, I want to learn more about this. How did you pull this off? How did you pull the partners together? So it's just, I think everybody should be really proud, and I'm so thankful that Village Square is willing to work with us and that we're putting on this very, very important, impactful, transformative work in this community, because it is very unusual to bring together government, an arts organization, and a civic organization to do something like this.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier?
I'm sorry, Liz, did you have anything? Okay.
Really, here is a
Yes.
resource.
Thank you both. Mandy, thank you for that.
Thank you all so much. We're so appreciative.
I really appreciate that, but having just come off at the conference, and I know I knew that we got some national recognition and everyone had the magazine but may not have been able to look at it yet. I just wanted to give you that opportunity. I guess without knowing exactly what the concerns might be, and I appreciate the motion and I'm glad we're going to move forward, the Created Equal series has been fantastic. I have still heard people reference the panel discussion this time where different people gave presentations. You all, our staff, did a great job with that. But really raw discussion about their experience as different minority groups in our community and other communities. This is a different angle on that through music, which is incredible. But again, everything I've learned in recent months and the national attention, this has a huge potential to impact our community in a different way and build on that Created Equal series. So I'm really proud of us for being a partner. I'm proud of you all for getting it done. So thank you, and looking forward to next March. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion on the floor for staff recommendation made by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. All those in favor of the motion will vote indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, aye. Motion passes 6-1. Move on now to citizens to be heard on non-agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we have no speakers under non-agenda items.
Move on to general business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, the first item, item number 16, is a status report on the Affordable Housing Work Group recommendations. I know this is one that the board has been anticipating. An Affordable Housing Work Group has been at it for a while. This is a status report on their recommendations and including consideration of next steps for the establishment of a Housing Leadership Council and a Community Land Trust. Commissioners, the Leadership Council would be comprised of affordable housing stakeholders and a cross-section of industry, including governments, nonprofit, lenders, developers, and realtors. As recommended by the Affordable Housing Work Group, the overall objective of the council would be to significantly improve the coordination and collaboration of the community's affordable housing efforts. To support this in its first year, there is a one-time funding request, which we are recommending of $5,000 each from the city and county to be paid to UPHS for staffing purposes of the Leadership Council. Also, as detailed in the agenda materials, is an additional strategy to increase the affordable housing inventory, as I mentioned before, through the creation of a community land trust. Commissioners, the community land trust would allow the affordable housing units to be built on land managed by a trust to remain affordable even upon resale. Working with Leon County's HFA in the city, the next step in assessing the feasibility of establishing a land trust is to issue an RFP, allowing for qualified organization to express interest. The results of the RFP, or in this case, it's an RFQ, request for qualifications, will be brought back to the board this fall. Finally, commissioners, as outlined in your agenda materials, we have with us today Ray Kunansky. I apologize if I butchered your name. He's the Chief Development Officer from Columbia Residential. He's here today to make a presentation to the board on the update of the Orange Avenue Apartments redevelopment project. That was a big mouthful. Yeah. That concludes my part. And with that, I'll hand it off for the presentation.
I am super excited about this presentation and what we're doing here today. Not even 2 years ago, we started this conversation. Look where we are here today. So, Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation today regarding the Orange Avenue Corridor Master Plan. But before we get into the actual presentation, I want to thank you for the support letter that you provided a couple of meetings ago. The support letter was submitted to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. I attended a workshop last week that was put on by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, and during the workshop, they discussed the actual recommendation or support that you provided in your letter. And if everything goes as planned, we should have an invitation from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation to submit applications in August for low-income housing tax credits. Then the applications are due in October, and if we're selected, we should have funding in place by the end of the year.
Excellent.
Okay. So with that being said, today you will hear a presentation from our developer partner. His name is Roy Kunansky with Columbia Residential.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I've met most of you individually over the last year and a half as we've been working through this process. And really, we can't do this without you all, without the mayor's office, without the city commission, and all of your support. That's critical to moving these things forward. What I'm going to do today is quickly run through the process that we utilized over the last 8 months and the workshops that we held, and how we came to the master plan that has now been adopted by the Housing Authorities Board, and we are moving forward with. So we started our process last July of 17, and in that process we interviewed some 90 different individuals and groups consisting of you all, consisting of City Commission, residents at Orange Avenue, neighborhood representatives from all the neighborhoods that surround the site, anyone who would specifically be impacted by any form of redevelopment along Orange Avenue. From there we moved into a series of workshops that were designed to use a lot of different techniques to get people to help us understand what the people of Tallahassee want for their neighborhood. You know, I don't live here. I'm from Atlanta. Our architect is from Dallas. There are some benefits of bringing people in from the outside because we don't know what we're looking at, and it's easier for us to listen. And as a result, we hear and translate that into what we hope is a workable document. So we started with a word cloud. In the first workshops, we had about 100 people participate. And we asked people over the course of the evening, we gave them blue cards, and we asked them to put down words that sparked their imagination about where they live, particularly about the Orange Avenue corridor. All those words were then compiled into computer word cloud, and this was the result. We then blew this up on a poster, and it sort of became the entrance sign to all of the workshops, to remind people of the words that they brought to the table as we started every workshop. The next thing was to do this, what's called a visual preference survey. So basically, you cover a wall full of photographs. And we usually start with about 300 photographs in the first session, and over the cycle of sessions, we narrow it down to less and less photographs. Everybody's given 5 green dots, 5 red dots. The idea is you take your dots and you put them green for the ones that you really like and red for the ones that you don't want to see. And you can see how quickly you get to what people really want in terms of a look and a feel. This isn't necessarily indicative of what the architecture will be once we get to the development itself, but it helps us with understanding what do people want to see in terms of scale and product type. And then, of course, what they don't want to see. You see on the ones at the bottom with the red dots. The next big thing we do in the analysis part of this is understand the piece of property that we're actually working with. This is a 29-acre site that's sort of in the middle of Orange Avenue. As you can see from the larger map, which is a flood zone map, that a healthy majority of this property is in either the floodway or the flood zone. By law, you have to build 2 feet above the 100-year flood zone if you're going to put property in the flood zone, and you really shouldn't be building in the floodway at all. So in this property, the dark red represents the floodway. So you can see that everything that really comes along Orange Avenue is actually in the floodway. The lighter color is the 100-year flood zone. The yellow is the 500-year flood zone. And then this part of the property is not in any flood zone at all. So we want to take that into context as we go through our master planning. Because it's typically not our policy to build in a floodway. You know, we will certainly work with local codes to build and make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the buildings and the units from flooding. Currently, there are a number of buildings that have been flooded many times as it's rained here. And of course, that was a chief concern of residents. That, you know, they preferred not to live in houses that get flooded every time there's a heavy rain. So all of the different exercises we went through, in addition to the visual preference, the word cloud, we also used an instant surveying process at each meeting. So you'd go through these different processes, you'd work with people at tables over thoughts and ideas, and then we do an instant, immediate answer survey through an electronic process so that people could see that, you know, 80% of the people in the room liked this, or, you know, 70% of the people in the room didn't like that, so that you could create more consensus that way in a much faster pattern by having things that were instantaneous. So what came out of all of this? This master plan. So you can see along Orange Avenue, we've moved the buildings back. So we're no longer putting anything in the floodway. And we're using the floodway as a place to create walking space, create green space. What were the big items that came out of almost every conversation with residents was green space, places to walk, places for kids to play, that were all safe, okay? So what we've learned in development over the years is that when you cluster buildings around green spaces, you create eyes on the neighborhood, and thus people are paying attention to what's going on. If you have front porches, people get out on them. If you're out on your front porch and you're looking into the area where kids are playing, you're paying more attention to what's going on. So simple things, but you've got to build and you've got to think that way as you're going through the development process. People really wanted a way for people to see in from Orange Avenue. Comment that came up several different times that I thought was quite interesting. One person put this really well. They said that Orange Avenue, when it was redesigned, was created basically as a tunnel to get people in and out of town. It was not recreated to allow people to see what's going on there and to invite people in. So, you know, you start thinking about that if you drive along Orange Avenue, it's kind of correct. It's not fully covered, it's not underground, but it does sort of feel like a tunnel that moves people in and moves people out of Tallahassee and ignores the neighborhoods that are all right there. So one of the big things that people said they would like to see is that this property was made more inviting. And this property was a contributor to that tunnel because if you remember, there's a 15-foot high hedge that runs the whole stretch along Orange Avenue so you can't see what's there. So by opening up and creating this green space and then opening up to the inside as you come down Orange Avenue, whichever way you're going, you can see into this community and see that there is a community there. And it was interesting. This came out a lot from folks. So we've also talked, that people also talked about scale. You know, you have single-family residential here, here, and all through here. And people talked about, you know, we don't want to see really big buildings sitting next to single-family residences. So everything that you see in pink that's a building is a two-story building. Things that you see in sort of that yellowish color are three-story buildings. And things that have the purplish color on them, they're three-story buildings, but the ground floor is for commercial-type activities. So leasing center, community center, fitness center, business center, those types of things where activities would take place indoors. We're basically taking Country Club and making it kind of a main street by having taller buildings up against the street, wide sidewalks, places to walk, get around, move about. And then everything that borders on the neighborhood is smaller buildings so that it's not threatening or uncomfortable to the neighbors. And this all came from lots of discussion between people who were living in these houses and people who were living on site and people living in the general neighborhood. Then all of this sort of divides into four tracks. We have 200 units of public housing on the site today. Part of the requirement to eventually tear down and rebuild is that you're required to replace one for one. For every unit, frankly, every bedroom, you have to have a new bedroom that's a public housing unit. To do that in a mixed income environment, you're talking basically 2 or 3 to 1. 3 new units for every 1 public housing unit. So ultimately, we've got to build somewhere between 550 and 600 units. Based on this plan, there will be about 390 units back on the site that currently houses 200 units. I know that sounds rather massive. It's almost doubling the number of units there, but there's quite a bit of acreage, and that it still is only 13 units per acre, which is pretty low density in the grand scheme of things. And by doing 3-story buildings along Orange and along Country Club, you increase your density in places where it makes sense, and it feels more normal, and you move your 2-story buildings against the neighborhood. We will have to build something off-site as part of the replacement of all of this. This is just an aerial view, a sketch to give you a sense of what this could look like. Another big item is how do you get across Orange Avenue? You've got the McLean Park that I personally walked myself. It took 15 minutes for me to walk from the community center, the Oliver Hill Community Center, to the park. And about 8 minutes of that was spent trying to get across Orange Avenue. Okay, it's really close. And it's a great asset that should be available to the residents at Orange Avenue and on this side of Orange Avenue. But it's not because you can't get across Orange Avenue. So people are afraid to try it. So we think some sort of a plaza here that allows for people to move across the street, get access through Appalachia Ridge, and move would be an important thing. And that again, came directly from the comments in the various discussions with neighbors and residents. So the other part of the exercise was to talk about the corridor between South Monroe and Blairstone. What should be there? What services do people want to see? Where do they expect them to be? So we did this locate, place, and choose exercise. So people are working around tables with maps. There were sticky notes that had pictures of schools and apartments and houses and pharmacies and grocery stores, anything and everything. And then blank was if there wasn't one that you could find that met what you were thinking about, you could write it on yourself. So 8 to 10 people working at a table are working to build consensus together around where they think things should be in the neighborhood. So this just gives you a sense. You can see the 6 tables for that particular session. People, some people got really into it and some people just took a very general view of it. All of these things were compiled to get to a master plan for the corridor itself, or a vision for the corridor itself. Many of these things also came out of meetings with city and county folks and understanding what the longer term plans and the longer term view is for the neighborhood. So last but not least is the next steps. And Brenda just told you a very important piece to the puzzle, and it frankly is happening much faster and much earlier than we had anticipated. But basically we have secured an off-site property. There's a 7.5 acre site at the corner of Magnolia and Country Club just up the hill that is about 3.2 acres of buildable space.
How many units will it hold?
Excuse me?
How many units will that
So our initial site plan of it is about 100 units in a 3-story elevated building for seniors that would encompass there's 3 different basins that water sheds into, so there are going to be 2 large detention areas that we would make into more of a park-like atmosphere with walking trails and places to sit. But it looks like that will get about 100 units there, so it gets us pretty close to filling the gap of what's necessary to replace what needs to be replaced before we work on the Orange Avenue site itself. So we are getting into schematic design now. We have a basic site plan. We'll have to be a little further along if they really issue this RFA in August, because that will be the first project that we are going forward with to get 9% credits. At the time this was done, it was anticipated that the RFA would be in October, but we just learned last week that Florida Housing Finance is thinking about issuing it quite a bit earlier, which is pretty exciting. So that would mean that we would get an allocation by the end of the year versus the application for the end of the year. And so it affects the rest of the schedule a little bit. It's important to understand that this is a long-term process. If all goes well, we will be in a position to put together the financing at the beginning of next year for the first project off-site, which would put it under construction sometime mid-2019 with a placed in service deadline of December of 2020. That would be the first project, first 100 units. We would then relocate people from the site up the hill into the senior property, and then we would start working through how to go about demolition, moving people around within the site while we work on different phases. Each phase typically takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 months to put together and get financed, and then another 15 months to construct and get open. So it's 30 to 36 months per phase. We anticipate that this will be at least a 3-phase project. So you're talking about a 9-year process if all goes well and you get financing at every turn and everything comes together. I will say that in my experience, it's rare that you get the level of interest and rallying around a project the way this one has received it here in Tallahassee. It's really impressive the way the county and the city have come together. It's even more impressive that everyone supported this with the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. They heard you. Their goals really came out of what you all said and what the City Commission said and the Mayor's Office said, and that's, in my experience of 35 years doing this, that's very unusual. So you should applaud yourselves, and hopefully you will see some groundbreaking next year. Any questions?
That's awesome. Real quick, I had to speak yesterday at Coca's Neighborhood of the Year event. I spoke with a resident. Oh no, actually, she wasn't a resident. She said her father was a resident, and some of her concern was the relocation process. And I heard you say that you guys are looking at trying to move folks to other units while units are being built for them to move back into. I know vouchers are something that we struggled with for a while. How is that whole relocation process? Are we giving vouchers? Are we trying to move within and then build and move people back? How are we dealing with that part?
Okay, what we heard from residents during the 8 months that we were going through this process is the majority of residents who were seniors, which represents about 30% of those living there, really want to stay in the neighborhood. And so that's why our first project is likely to be a senior project, because it would be very easy to get that built. And it's literally, you can walk to where this site is from Orange Avenue, which is pretty exciting. So if we do that, then about 30% of the residents would move just up the hill. And that would open up buildings for us to work through a process where we could demolish one part of the site, rebuild on that site, and then move people into new units on site. About 60% is family that are currently living there, and a healthy percentage of those, probably 50% of the families living there, their preference would be vouchers. And so that's a process that we will work with the Housing Authority to determine exactly how to go forward and address that so that people get as much choice as they can. Clearly, relocation is a very expensive proposition because even when you give out vouchers, you are then subject to filling a gap in rent that may be substantially larger than the gap that currently exists in public housing where you're getting operating support through HUD. And you know, the reality, unfortunately, is there are very limited resources as it relates to that. And so if you can accomplish relocation and make people happy by moving people through the site and basically covering moving costs, then it's a lower cost. People get a new unit, which, you know, I like to think we build a good product.
You do.
And so people would be happy ultimately that way. But that really does remain to be seen exactly how it will be done. We want to do it in the most efficient way possible, and we want to do the best to make people happy.
I'm sure the goal is 100% of those who live in these type of situations come back to live on that same piece of property. But the question I have is, what is the average rate of return back to the property that's being rebuilt?
Okay. So if you look at the Hope 6 program from, 15 years ago, which is really the best model that I can think of, the average rate of return nationally is 12%. But think about this. If you are on a property that is going to be fully demolished, everyone's going to be given a voucher, you are now in a position as an individual where you're not tied to the property. The voucher is yours. You can go wherever they will accept it. Versus if it's a project-based circumstance or public housing circumstance, you have no choice. If you have the subsidy on that property, the only way you keep that subsidy is staying on that property. So people like that freedom. People move. These things take 2 to 3 years to come together per project. So if you're a single, parent with 2 kids, and you take a voucher and you move across town and your kids get happy in school and you like where you're living and, the likelihood of your moving again is slim to none. So the rates of return are very low typically.
The last question that the resident asked me was in the way of gentrification. I'm very interested in making sure.
Could you talk a little louder?
The last question that the young lady asked me was on the point of gentrification. I know in New Orleans, the rebuild of the property there still yielded about, I think before it was like 95%. I think now it's still 98% or something like that. What are you doing, or how can we go about achieving that same type of success in stifling gentrification in this site. It would be newer, so people assume that the rate of rent would be a little higher. Though I want to see new buildings there, I would like to see the complexity of the community to stay the same. Learned earlier on in my career, you shouldn't have to change your zip code in order to change the way you live or the amenities that you enjoy in the place that you live. And so, is there a plan to make sure that gentrification doesn't happen on the site?
So the plan is to develop a mixed income community. The plan is to put back substantially more units than were there in the first place. In fact, doubling the amount of units on site, add the 100 units at the top of the hill, and you're putting 500 units back where there were 200 units of public housing. Ultimately, 200 units or the 512 bedrooms that currently constitute the public housing units, every one of those will be replaced in a subsidized unit circumstance that is ultimately owned by the Housing Authority and will always be there. There will be another section of units that will be held to a rent restriction at 60% or below area median income by the tax credit for a 30 to 50 year cycle. Our company's philosophy is that at the end of the initial compliance period, we typically roll through re-up and maintain that affordability, and then a final portion will be at market rate. The importance of bringing some market rate into the community is that it brings other people into the community, and it does help address the blight and the poor housing stock that exists in parts of this community, and it allows for redevelopment of vacant land because it begins to be seen as a different place. The reality of gentrification is that the biggest thing that prices people out of their homes is not the fact that the house becomes more valuable, it's that their property taxes go up. And so an issue for you all to consider as it relates to public policy is how do you address that particular issue? Because that's why people eventually leave or have no choice but to leave, is that their property values and their property taxes exceed their ability to pay. And they either have to lose their house or they have to figure out another way to address that issue. It's hard to avoid some form of change over time. This community is, minutes from the state capitol from where we are right now. And over time, as what is happening all over this country, people are migrating to those communities that are closer to where the primary amenities and their cities are. So, A, we will create more long-term affordable units on this site than exists today. B, there will be public housing there in perpetuity because that's the goal and the objective of the public housing agency that's a partner in the transaction. And C, there will be market rate units there, which drives the ability to produce amenities that people are looking for.
What's the anticipated percentage of market rate?
Excuse me?
What's the anticipated percentage of market rate? Do you know yet?
In terms of percentage?
Yes.
Okay. Somewhere in the 25 to 30% range.
Okay. And will there be dwellings that accommodate large families, let's say a family of 4 or 5?
So based on the survey that we've done through the authority and the current plan, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom units. Based on the information that we have from the authority and their various wait lists, the majority of the 5-bedroom units are typically overhoused individuals, and HUD won't allow that.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for indulging me there. Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Lowe's. Commissioner Lowe's, you have the floor.
Did you say Deloge?
Commissioner Dozier. I'm sorry. I do have one speaker. You guys want to take up the speaker first?
Please.
Mr. Wilson?
Bill Wilson, 1816 Old Fort Drive, Tallahassee. President of the Graceful Solutions and Chair of your Joint City-County Affordable Housing Task Force. Just want to say thank you for moving forward with the land trust issue. We think that's a great tool that we really need. Also, thank you for the continuation or the new approach to continuing the work that the task force did with this new approach for the council. I do think, though, that your $5,000 contribution is greatly underfunded what's needed to get a new organization up and running. If we're really going to collect data, share the data, and start bringing a collaboration and different memberships together, something more than a clerical person scheduling meetings and setting out the goodies and drinks, it's not going to get it done the first year. So it's going to need more than that to really get rolling. But thanks for your support.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate the presentation. It is remarkable to go from first meeting, I don't know if that was a year and a half ago, to where we are now. So thank you very much. I'm really excited about this. Just a couple of quick thoughts. And Mr. Chair, you kind of worked right into a couple of thoughts I was having, although I hearken back, and I'm glad you mentioned this about the mixed use and the revenues from that, or the mixed income. The revenues from that helping to support the long-term maintenance of the property. This was something that stood out, I think it was in the fall of 15 when we initiated the conversation about a joint workshop with the city. That was the biggest takeaway I had from, and Brenda, I can't even see you behind the podium right now, but I know you're listening. So from you and our friends from Tampa, just really focused on that piece of it. So I applaud your efforts here, the partnership we have. I'm thrilled to hear that from your perspective, we've got everybody working in the same place in the same direction, and that's, I'm sorry it's unusual, but I'm thrilled for us because let's be honest and say that hasn't always been the MO for our community, so this is fantastic. So really glad to hear all of that. What stuck out most to me is not actually anything from the presentation, but this comment, and I agree, this is just remarkable that Orange Avenue redesign was a tunnel. And as you described that, and then described the walk to Jack McLean, in the area where we may have more people walking than some other areas, to make that, to not have that be first and foremost on our mind of accessibility is really interesting. Now, that was a while ago when Orange was redeveloped, so I would hope that whether it's on the Transportation Board, CRTPA, Blueprint, wherever it might be, that we will continue to work in partnership in that to address those issues. But I also wanted to lift up that comment because what you're highlighting there, I think, is what needs to be on our mind. Even it will be on my mind going into the Blueprint meeting this week and looking at other infrastructure projects. This is really a holistic approach. And I think we talked about in the workshop, at least my hope is this is the first of many, this is the first approach. We're going to learn a lot here, and we may be able to duplicate this or elements of it in other areas of the community that need. So just really appreciate you focusing on that, and I hope it's something we pay attention to in all of our work in other areas of the community as well.
We heard that comment from several different folks who live there.
Yeah.
And so it really stuck with us.
I really appreciate that. Well, my last question, Mr. Chair, is probably more for Brenda, and this is just kind of a gut check here because we talk about our affordable housing inventory being pretty low, and so my understanding, and Mr. Chair, you asked about the return rate. I'm not surprised at all that only 12% come back. A perfect description. If you're set up someplace else on a voucher, you might stay there. The applications for vouchers or the requests outnumber your ability to provide, the number of vouchers you have to provide. The number 20,000 stands out in my mind. Is that right, Brenda?
That's correct. Well, the last time we opened the waiting list last year, we received 18,000 applications.
And we're looking at replacing 200 units with a few more. So,
well, actually, for relocation purposes, we will issue vouchers as they turn over.
Yes, ma'am. I was going to come directly to that because the first part is the demand is so great. So if you're issuing vouchers for those moving out and they're able to be set up someplace else, the demand is so great that this just creates more opportunities for people on that wait list to have housing
Absolutely.
in the future.
Yes.
So I think that's a value added. Do we have enough affordable housing out there to house those people with the vouchers, or is that a concern of yours?
It is a very big concern, and no, we do not have enough housing out there. We need more affordable housing.
And projects like the Land Trust or others, looking at maybe old student housing apartments that could be brought online and improved as affordable housing, that would be one way to look at this
Absolutely. You know, there's been a lot of turnover due to new student housing.
Yes.
So there are other apartment complexes out there that we could take a look at in terms of, you know, purchasing and converting them over to affordable housing.
And a land
That is
trust
an
model would give us that opportunity?
Well,
or maybe others? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I see everybody nodding behind you too, so you've got a whole group there.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was great presentation, but I think that issue is something we've got to pay attention to parallel to the design and planning and construction if everybody keeps working, because we got to make sure we have places for those folks to go.
And then we don't want to forget about Springfield.
No, ma'am.
It really needs to be redeveloped as well.
Like I said, I hope this is the
One
first
project
of many.
at a time.
Yes, you're doing great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I'm excited.
I actually, Brenda, know 2 projects at a time if you can make it happen. So don't limit yourself.
2 projects at a time if we can make it happen.
Yeah.
If we can make it happen.
Hey, if we can find the money.
Commissioner Dozier, real quick on your point, you know, I think we have a unique situation with the development that's going on in College Town and in the urban core. But the thing I keep coming back to is the places where folks are moving from, those college students are moving from, and I'm familiar with because they were college housing when I was in college. They're so far from the urban core, you know, that we would have to also think about transportation and things like that for folks who if we did buy those properties, decide to move in. So, but I think you bring up an excellent point. We have to prepare for that. Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Loge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be kind of quick on this. I really appreciate this almost miraculous presentation and turnaround. I know we're just agreeing to the staff report and so forth, but I just want to say when I think about going down to the Oliver Hill Center, I think Commissioner Maddox, you were there, and you were the guy who stepped up. This is maybe 3 or possibly even 4 years ago. Yep. It's been a long time, and I just want to congratulate you because you have stayed the course for years on affordable housing. It's been picked up in the community, and we are, you know, I love to be able to say this is proof positive that we can identify a problem that goes throughout our community, and we can put our heads together and our hearts together and really make things happen. And it doesn't happen in a few weeks or a few months, but it happens, and I just am overjoyed, and I just want to give you a really great slap on the back and pat on the back, too, for them. Slap and then a pat. Slap later, pat now, for that. You had kind of actually raised some of my questions about the relocation, because I do think that is a huge issue, and I hope that that's going to be worked through with a lot of consideration for the way a lot of people who have lived in those apartments have lived there for years, and I think it would be traumatic as well as physically a huge chore if their pack rat habits are anything at all like mine. And, you know, so I'm glad that that's being given a lot of consideration going forward, and if we can help with that, I'd like to know. The other thing I wanted to say was this is just an observation, really, but we have our community redevelopment agencies going all the time. But something like this is really going to, I think, change the character of the whole area too, because once you see this really, you know, wonderful new mixed-use development, meeting our goals of, or helping to meet our goals of affordable housing, I think other people are going to pick up interest in getting into South City in ways that CRA hasn't actually been able to achieve, and this is just going to be a big boost to that. So I appreciate so much just the ramifications of what is happening. It's housing, and it's better housing for more people, but it's bigger than that, and I just want to thank you for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Deloge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brenda, you've done a yeoman's job. We appreciate your steadfastness in this effort. Chairman Maddox has been, from day one, a supporting force to this effort and leading myself. I think that Curtis Richardson has seen the light and been a strong advocate for even extending the CRA to include this area, which hopefully will undergird its stability, augmenting efforts that you have taken upon yourselves with public and private dollars. The word gentrification, which I heard Chairman Maddox indicate, is one which I have heard in the community. The couple of community forums which Mr. Kunaski has referenced, I attended two, and just on the streets, that word frequently comes up. We did not hear you say with specificity, though I've heard you say in the forums that existing tenants, to Commissioner Maddox's point, would have the first right of refusal, and they get first.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
By law.
By law, and that's
Yes.
the HUD requirement.
Yes.
And I think that among the things that you shared with us, that point was omitted, and I think that it's very important that the public is aware that existing tenants get the first dibs on whether or not they want to stay. But once they get that voucher, and 3 years go by, things change sometimes. I wanted to ask if the CCQ project in the Southwest Corridor study, Mr. County Administrator, if these things are being looked at distinct and independent of each other, and that we might create a greater harmony and a synthesis of all of these activities. Florida State is doing on one end of Orange Avenue, Tallahassee Housing Authority is doing on this end of Orange Avenue, and then what has been left with absolutely from the roundabout back over the Southwood, where we've already seen a major multi-million-dollar facelift with the Veterans Clinic there at the top of the hill of Blairstone and Orange Avenue. Additionally, I think that since the last time this commission that we met, I believe that there's a 600 or 700 unit building that is open now, and tenants are between Blairstone on Orange Avenue, between Blairstone and Capitol Circle, across the street from Southwood. There are a lot of units there that have opened, and then we're coming down the hill inside of Jim Lee and Meridian to open up 500 more units. I just think that with the 700 new apartment units on the on the east end of Orange Avenue, what is going to happen here in the east central part of Orange Avenue, we're planning to open up 4 lanes from FAMU DRS at Wanish Way all the way down to the golf course, that as opposed to, we have a Southwest Corridor study, we got the CCQ study, and what I'm asking is, why won't we, looking at all of these units happening on Orange Avenue right now, can we not look at something a little more comprehensive? And Vince, could you tell us about these moving parts?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Ben was making his way to the lectern there. I think you correctly noted the Southwest Corridor study, as well as the CCQ project in the area, in addition to this project, and with blueprint and planning under Ben's purview, he may have some thoughts to share with us relative to the coordination of those.
Well, I do think all of this is going to be discussed at the workshop, particularly as we look at the funding plan, but absolutely, as we've presented at prior Blueprint IA meetings this is all interconnected. We'll have an update on all of the state roadways. You mentioned Orange Avenue and its widening. Obviously, we'll be talking again about the Airport Gateway project, which also ties together, and we'll be talking about a couple of CCQ projects, Orange Adams and Meridian Road placemaking. I guess the bottom line from our perspective is absolutely, Commissioners, we look at what's going on within the various regions. We look at collaborations with community partners to make sure that we're able to leverage, and we're always working with, whether it's state DOT, whether it's CRTPA, that we're aligning external resources beyond the sales tax dollars to be sure that we're expediting this as quickly as we can. In 2 days' time, we'll be talking about even additional expedition opportunities to elevate some of these programs forward. And as was released yesterday in the workshop agenda items, substantial of these projects are in the South Side, including the ones that you mentioned, Commissioner.
But if Commissioner Proctor, if you'd like us to, in addition to what's happening at the IA, if you'd like us to pull all of this together and bring you back a presentation to show how they all come together, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's very, very important. Orange Avenue, right across the street from Southwood, they haven't even filled those units. They're spanking brand new, about 2 weeks old, 600 or 700 units. Ms. Williams is going to bring another 500 and some units right down that hill on Orange Avenue. Florida State is going to be doing some things out on the west end of Orange Avenue. Orange Avenue is the emerging nerve center of the South Side, where everything from Florida A&M feeds into it, Gaithers Park, Appalachia Ridge, South City, Pond community, Florida, everything comes through Orange Avenue, everything. And it is the avenue and the parkway and the heartthrob of that from Southwood all the way back over to the airport, really from Southwood all the way back going to I-10. And I think that it's too loosey-goosey, willy-nilly. And we have to look at all of these emerging truths that are occurring before our eyes, and it ought to be coordinated as best we can. This is going to be a special roadway in 15 years, and there is no question that Orange Avenue, which tonight, under my time, I want to propose as the Barack Obama Boulevard, under my time, and the staff will look at that. I think that if we're courageous to adopt Orange Avenue as Barack Obama Boulevard, that it's going to be a real force in the country. And our need for a grocery store down in that Lake Bradford Road area, or somewhere back along by Rickards or someplace, we need to really. So, Mr. Administrator, you've heard my ask, and I hope that the board agrees with me. Thank you.
Is there any objection to staff bringing back a presentation that connects all of the different sectors of Orange Avenue and the plans on those sectors? Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, take that as direction. Commissioner Loesch.
Mr. Chair, let me add to the accolades. Nice job. You've really been the champion for this, and it's been something I know that's been a big interest of yours for a while, and so this is a success. Looks like a pretty successful finish. Nice job. I was peripherally involved years ago when we did the Goodbread Hills or Cake, whatever the one is over in Frenchtown, when it was the old Ebony Gardens. I grew up when it was Ebony Gardens, and it was a rough area over there, and it completely transitioned that place. I mean, it really made a big difference. And so I think the combination of Cascades Park, FAMU Way Extension, all the things that are happening on the south side of town, plus this, I think what you're going to find is that entire Myers Park neighborhood is going to start to look a little bit like Lafayette Park in the next 10 years. It's just that south side leadership coming on strong. But thank you, nice job. And I guess the only ask would be, do you need any help with Florida Housing Finance? I mean, we're here. There's things we can do to kind of help, lobby. I'm happy to, for what it's, I don't know how competitive it is. I don't understand the process, but I'm happy to help.
Well, I appreciate your saying that, because we will be back If the RFA comes out in August, it will dictate what we have to have in order to be successful in applying and getting a tax credit allocation. The application, what we were told, would be due in October. So we will be back in September with, at a minimum, asking for a resolution of support, if not something else.
And if you could give us some direction on that, yeah, and I would move staff's recommendation.
Second. Staff recommendation been moved by Commissioner Lowe, seconded by Commissioner Daly. Before you sit down, the services. Very familiar with the services that were provided to other properties that you have in Atlanta and New Orleans. Would those type of similar services for the residents be provided in the Orange Avenue new concept that we're coming up with when it comes to, I mean, as simple as teaching people how to work their thermostats to, financial literacy training and things like that? Would those type of services be provided?
So typically we have we added a resident services group to our company about 6 years ago and brought on a licensed social worker within MSW who now has a team of 7. And yes, we offer core services as you just mentioned. In addition, every property has a business center where people have access to a computer, access to the internet, and ability to do that for free in print, as well as fitness centers and other things. Our resident services group will come on site once it's reoccupied, and poll residents and talk to residents to figure out what it is that is needed on that site, and then work up a programmatic approach to that in conjunction with what the Housing Authority already does. They do a lot of kids programs and summer programs and things that are great.
Thank you. Motion on the floor for staff recommendation. I'm sorry, Commissioner
Interject just one final point, Chairman. You went on all of the tour points of New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa. This housing that's occurring and coming and emerging underscores what I understand Atlanta was very strong at, and that was the educational component.
Right.
And I believe that to grow the south end of the community, it ain't going to happen without quality schools. And I think that it would be naive on our part to think that we're going to build brick and mortar, and the perception of schools are not to people's appetite, their liking. And I wanted to ask the board's permission, because I didn't make Atlanta, I missed, but I do want to, Ms. Kunaski has invited me to view the educational integration of Atlanta's auxiliary educational features with their housing component. And I had never seen that, and I'd like to see it in as much as he's extended that invitation to see what this can be on the south side. But when we approved that travel back then, for whatever reason, I can't remember, I didn't go, but I would like the board's permission to receive the invitation to go and look at the educational integration of Atlanta.
What you'll find, I don't think is there being an objection, but if you ask for that during your time later on, I don't think any board member would object to you seeing it. But what you'll find is that the concentration was really focused initially on preschool, preschool, 0 to 3, in particular, 0 to 3. So early
reading,
early childhood education is where it was really focused. Educare is one. I think that was in Atlanta, I believe.
Educare is in New Orleans.
Right. Educare is in New Orleans, and then Atlanta had their own version of it.
Right.
But it takes those kids from the time that they, get here until they start school and start.
I want some of that right there. That's what I want in this right here. I don't want just bricks and mortar down there. We need those other components that I'm hearing about, and we got to talk that into kids knowing how to read when they get to the schoolhouse. That's something you don't learn at school. That's something you bring there when you get there.
That's right.
Being able to read. So I want to see that. And
so let me add a piece here. I think you all are aware about the Purpose-Built Communities initiative that's currently ongoing here. Purpose-Built Communities is out of Atlanta. They were an offshoot of the Cousins team that developed Eastlake. And the model at Eastlake is all about health, education, and housing, the 3 legs of stability for households. You have to be invited to be part of their network, and they are currently, and have been for the last several months, working an initiative with a local group here that includes the Housing Authority in the Orange Avenue site of defining that as the site to move that very agenda forward here. And they're looking at Wesson Elementary with the blessing of the school superintendent to look toward converting that into an early childhood center while making improvements to the other schools in the neighborhood for these residents. And it's an incredibly successful program. We work with Purpose Built in 6 communities in 4 states now. Orlando is one of our more recent propositions with them. I think that Tallahassee is very close to being invited into their network, and with that comes an immense amount of free consulting support from people who have done this in many communities and know how to push your community to work on this for yourselves. And it's a very exciting thing, and Lorraine Osley is currently sort of chairing the steering committee effort that's going on now. I know Courtney Atkins, who may still be here, is very involved in it. It's really a very exciting thing, and it will really get exactly to that point, Commissioner Proctor.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Ms. Kunaski.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff recommendation moved by Commissioner Deloge, seconded by Commissioner Daly. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Commissioners, we got a full agenda of public hearings. I want to get through general business before we break. I would expect we should be able to do that by at least 5:30. Give us a 30-minute break. So item number 17, Mr. Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this item seeks board authorization for staff to negotiate with the engineering services with ISS for design permitting services for Woodville Sewer Project. Specifically, Commissioners, the contract will provide for the design and engineering of the entire sewer system for the Woodville rural community, which addresses approximately 1,500 septic tanks serving residences and businesses. Again, this item has been properly bid and budgeted, and this seeks your authorization for option number 1.
Move option 1, Mr. Chairman.
Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Daly. Commissioner Daly, you're in queue. Was it for the motion?
Yep, make motion.
Yes, sir. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 18.
Mr. Chairman, item number 18 is a resolution that is the draft of a support for both the restoration of voting rights for felons, and it also expresses the board's support for the amendment to the Constitution that is on the ballot, that is Florida Amendment number 4. And so it is drafted and here for your consideration per your direction at your prior commission meeting in May.
Move option 1, Mr. Chairman.
Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Daly. All those in support of option, I'm sorry, I got one speaker card on the item. John, come on up. I'm so sorry.
John Hedrick at 1551 Cristobal Drive.
Yes, sir.
We saw this on the agenda. I didn't realize that you already put this on from a prior meeting. So it sounds like, unless something surprising happens, I don't think we need to say a whole lot since we're already behind this type of an effort. So
thank you.
I'll stop right there.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing your comments. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Any
opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on now to item number 19. Mr. Turney.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Item number 19 is the culmination of your direction back in February to draft and put out an RFP to select outside counsel to participate in the ongoing litigation over the opioid crisis here in Leon County, Florida, and the United States. The RFP was out on the street. The responses were received at the end of April. Pursuant to the RFP and pursuant to our procedure, An evaluation committee was held. The 2 meetings were publicly noticed and open to the public. The evaluation committee met and based upon the criteria in the RFP assigned various points to each of the parts of the proposal, total of 100. And at the conclusion of that, the board, the evaluation committee members, all concluded that we had been very fortunate in receiving 4 very competitive and four very good proposals from excellent law firms and excellent lawyers in those law firms. There was nothing in any of the proposals which led us to believe that somebody who was not competent and not willing to represent Leon County wholeheartedly, that didn't occur in the 4 proposals. So we got very fortunate that we didn't get some sort of off-the-wall sort of a proposal. They were all very good. It made the assignment of points and the ranking of the firms a little more difficult, but the evaluation committee made a collective, if you would, evaluation, and that's why there's just one scoring sheet. While any or all of the firms, including their local counsel, could represent the county, the evaluation committee concluded that the firm of Parks and Levin Papantino was the #1 ranked firm. They have significant clientele throughout the United States, including many local governments here in Florida, including Pinellas, Pasco, Miami-Dade, the city of St. Petersburg, and many others. And so with all of those considerations in mind, the evaluation committee recommends that you select the Parks Levin Papantino firm as the top team, and then that, if you approve that option, then you are directing the county attorney's office to negotiate a retainer agreement with that firm in accord with their proposal, and it would not come back to you. It would be signed by me as if I was retaining otherwise outside counsel, as I do periodically, and so that's our recommendation. And I can try to answer questions as best I can about process or rankings.
Thank you, sir. I have one speaker.
Barney Bishop.
Before I forget, I want to acknowledge that we received a letter today from the Fonville firm signed by Mr. Messer, who's here. I specifically asked them earlier today whether I was to consider that a bid protest, and the answer was no. So you are free to select the firm this evening that you choose, and you could select any of them, but again, our recommendation is the #1 ranked firm.
Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Barney Bishop. I live at 2215 Thomasville Road, Tallahassee, Florida. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I would like to request a few extra minutes. Thank you, sir. We're very fortunate that County Attorney Herb Tila had a chance to talk to Mr. Messer and I before this meeting, shared with us some allegations of some legitimate concerns, twofold. Number one, that we violated the code of silence by talking to some commissioners starting on Monday morning. And I would just suggest to you that, number one, I would never violate the cone of silence. I called up Shelley Kelly on Monday morning. She told me that cone of silence was off. It was on the board agenda, and that we were free to talk to any commissioner. So we proceeded on that basis. Number two, there was a concern that this was a bid protest. And as you all know, in your procurement, there's only 72 hours to protest a bid. We're not here to protest a bid because you haven't made a decision yet. We're here, commissioners, because we want to talk about the process. So we hand-delivered to each of y'all's office this morning a 3-page letter from Mr. Messer, who is here with me today, to talk about that process. First question that we have is, are there individual scoring sheets? And as you heard from the county attorney, there are not. I've only been doing this kind of business before the state and the county and the city since 1979, so I'm still probably pretty green under the under the tree, but let me suggest to you that best practices for procurement at any level is that you always have individual scoring sheets. Some state agencies have gone to group scoring, but in those cases, they tape record the meeting so that there's some transparency and so that there's some accountability about who said what and why somebody gets a particular points or not. That wasn't the case. I obtained the copies of the minutes of the meeting. They're about 2 paragraphs long. They don't say anything about who said what on any one issue. So they're very nice minutes, but they're not going to give us the accountability and transparency that I think you're entitled to, and I think that all law firms that were litigating, that were working to be selected by y'all would expect. Second, there are 2 scoring issues related to consultants. One is number 3B, and one is number 5C. Commissioners, there was only one team that had a list of consultants. It was our team. No other team had consultants. If they don't have consultants, you can't give them a score. I mean, it's just that simple. You either got consultants or you don't. If you don't get a score. Yet this evaluation team gave them scores. That's not right. Third, there was a scoring issue called references, and no references were called for in the procurement. None were provided by any of the teams. I spent Father's Day looking at every one of the answers, including our own, and I even called up our lawyers up in Baltimore to say, didn't we talk about references? And they said, yes, that was for when we were finalists for the state of Florida. We didn't get selected, but there were no references asked for, none given. So any scores for references have got to be 0 because there are no references. Fourth, on the scoring of the issue entitled Staff Experience in Similar Projects, our team was given a big fat 0. Yet we have one of the original Dream Team lawyers in David Fonville, Mr. Messer's senior named partner, who 20 years ago litigated on behalf of the state of Florida for tobacco. I'm not sure how Mr. Fonville became a 0, but I'm concerned that that just isn't right. Let me just leave it there. Fifth, on a scoring issue called qualifications of the legal team, again, our team wasn't given enough credit for who is on our team. We even have Mr. Peter Weinberger, who has been selected by the federal judge in Cleveland, Ohio, several times before as a co-liaison counsel, and we weren't given any credit for that. The scores should have been probably within 1 of each. I will say that the Levin Papantonio firm has got 3 people in leadership, and we've got 1, but that's all relative. The distance in points is the issue. Sixth, on the issue of technical competence of our attorneys, our team was inappropriately scored down despite having a Dream Team lawyer on our team. Seventh, on issue number 4, titled Current Workload, it appears that more points were awarded if you had more clients already signed. Now, I'm first one here to tell you, I read the Parks Levin Papantonio answer. They have 460 clients. They're an incredible law firm. I've known Fred Levin and Mike Papantonio since 1987 when I worked for the Academy of Florida Trial Lawyers, now the Florida Justice Association. They're 2 of the finest attorneys in this state. But commissioners, let me just ask you this question. You want to have somebody that represents 460 clients and you're just little bit Leon County? Or our team represents 9 clients in Florida, more than the Papantonio firm does in Florida, not the rest of the country. We only represent 9 in the whole world that happen to be in Florida. Would you rather have us calling you back when you have a question or a concern, or a team that's got 460, where you're just going to be one of a bunch? So we think that that really should be scored the opposite way. Instead of having the most points for having the most clients, we think the fewer clients, if you're a competent team, is a good reason to get a good score. 10 is the quality side of the issue. And on that, every team did an outstanding job of showing off their legal side, but the points don't show it. In addition, there is a corollary issue that needs to be mentioned. In the answer from the Parks Levin Papantonio firm, They didn't submit any insurance documents. Now, I was the only person there at the opening of the documents, and I thought it was just an oversight. But when I read the answer from that team on Father's Day, it appears that they purposely didn't give you their insurance documents. Why? Because they say that there should be an exception to the RFP. Now, commissioners, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of an exception to an RFP. Does that mean that I don't have to submit the affirmative action affidavit because I don't want to? If I win, I'll submit it to you, because that was the quote coming from their RFP. Their quote said that if we win, we'll be more than happy to provide you with the documents. Well, commissioners, it's not the way we do business. If you're required to produce exhibits and it's an oversight, we can all forgive that. But if you purposely don't give the documents because you're waiting to see if you get a win, that's patently wrong. Now, I told you I worked for the bar, for the trial bar back in 1987. Mr. Parks is here today, and I think so much of him. I think Darrell will agree that I solicited him to be on our team. But he already had a commitment to the Levin Papantonio team, and I can't blame him for that at all. But this isn't about personalities. This isn't about lawyers. This is about a process. Commissioners, I've been working with lawyers since since 1973 when I was a private detective in Orlando for 10 years. You have got four, as the county attorney said, you've got four outstanding law firms. To have a spread in points of 32 points between the top team and the bottom team is ludicrous. These teams should be separated by 2 or 3 or 4 points. I'm not here to ask you today to give us the win, because we're in third place and we're 20 points behind. But I am here to ask you to make sure that Leon County has a fair, transparent, and accountable process. This is about process. This isn't that anybody scored something wrong, but there are issues that you can't ignore, and there's 3 of them where scores can't be given. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Is there any more speakers, public speakers on the item?
There are not.
There are not. Commissioners? Yes.
This is one of those times where it's really challenging to unpack all of these issues, given the short time we've had the letter, well articulated, Barney and Mr. Messer for sure. But as I have said many times, I'm sure you all, I believe strongly that our team tries exceptionally hard and does well administering a fair process. We, as a board, lean towards an RFP or a bid or something like that over no-bid situations all the time. We feel very strongly about that. I think we've come to this issue a lot. So if there were issues with this, we need to look at them, but I've not heard any specifics. So I'm sorry, from the county attorney side. So I would like to hear what your response is, Mr. County Attorney. I guess in a brief conversation, I'll just make this comment with you. It was my impression that this, the approach to scoring, which seems to be an issue, has been utilized by Leon County in the past. So there's precedent for using that particular approach and having the documentation that is provided. So that would be one question. And then I just wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts on the rest of the issues that Mr. Bishop brought up.
Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir. Commissioner, one, we have utilized the, if you would, team evaluation approach on scores of other occasions. The most recent one of which was the selection of bond counsel and disclosure counsel, both by the county and by Blueprint. That was all done as a team matter. It was done at a noticed public meeting like we had for this evaluation. So I have absolutely no heartburn about having a team approach to the scoring and evaluation. it violates no laws, and frankly makes it, I think, I don't think it's a transparency issue. I think it is just making sure that all of the people in the room who are doing the evaluation are okay with the scores as they were assigned.
You just said that that discussion takes place at a public meeting?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Two public meetings. Any of the proposal representatives could have attended. No one did. We had one member of the public attend. On the scoring issue, anybody can quibble about the scoring. It is not a bid like a unit price. It is not something that has a mathematical calculation like you would if you were buying asphalt or concrete or pencils. It is based upon an evaluation by, in this case, 3 individuals who came up with those scores. Sure, I could make an argument for different scores, lower or higher in each of the categories, but I can tell you, now I'm only one of the members of the evaluation team, but I can tell you that even after having briefly read the letter from this afternoon and understanding their concerns, I don't believe that my support of the evaluation committee's recommendation of who ought to be the #1 selection would change at all. Maybe others of the proposals might have some points up or down, but at the end of the day, the Parks Levin Papatanio firm, I'll get that eventually correct, was our #1 by significant amount rated firm. I noticed in the letter there was a mock, if you would, reevaluation done by the Fonville firm, and in all honesty, I don't believe that 97 is an appropriate number for their proposal. And so I'm comfortable with the scores. Yeah, could we have adjusted them up and down 5 or 10 points? It still would have not disturbed the #1 rated firm. And we, as an evaluation, now, I can't talk to the other people on the evaluation committee because we would have to have a noticed public meeting to do that because it's a decision-making committee. So I've not discussed that with the other members of the committee, but if you're asking me personally, I'm still good with the recommendation.
Yes, ma'am.
One last question, Mr. Chair, and then I'd love to hear from colleagues if there's any other discussion here. These specifics on references or consultants, any comment on that, or you leave it as it is?
The one RFP did not mention the names, but mentions that they have had consultants. If you have 460 other clients, including round numbers 20 in Florida, you have consultants. There's no doubt about that. I didn't need to know the names of them at this stage. So that's one. What was the other? References? No, we didn't ask for references, but nothing prohibited me from calling references, and I did.
So that's what your score was based on, your individual calling of?
I called them after we scored.
Okay, got it.
Just because I didn't want to have it disturbed, but I wanted to make sure myself that the other people who were listed as clients of the #1 recommended firm were good with who they had retained, and I got no negative feedback, frankly, from anybody I called, and I called on all of the firms.
Okay. Again, this is a challenging issue because we're not in the room with the committee. I have a lot of trust in our process, understand, particularly on this issue, we're dealing with a lot of exceptional lawyers, and you guys are great at picking or looking at things from all angles, and I really appreciate that skill. I think it was fair. I mean, we've got 4 teams that were great. I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm glad the issues be brought up, but without additional information, I'm hearing that this is not, this is a typical process for us, and I'm comfortable with the answers unless we wanted to open everything back up and go through point by point, which I'm not sure we need to do. And I'll leave that, the rest of the discussion. That's as much as I have for right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Daly in queue to speak. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
Chairman, I've been talking a lot. I will defer
Commissioner Daly.
to Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Look, sometimes we get through the process and sometimes questions come up. A lot of times when we have these RFPs, one of the first things that we ask is, were there any problems with the process? I think in today's day and age, with everything that's going on in the community, all of our processes have to be squeaky clean. I don't think it's time sensitive to the point where if we did go out for RFP and bring it back for a squeaky clean process, no skin off our back. That is what I'm looking for today, because in today's day and age, I think that decisions of this importance have to have no question about the process whatsoever. I agree with the county attorney, and I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know if it's going to change the standing, but I think that the process has got to be without question. So I'm going to make a motion for option number 3, which is to reject all the proposals and request that a new RFP be issued to be brought back for final selection.
Motion been made for option number 3 to reject all the proposals and to ask for a new RFP to come back, made by Commissioner Daly. Is there a second to that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second. Okay. Mr. Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I was then serving as special assistant to Governor Lawton Chiles when Farnville firm did something that absolutely nobody was expecting. That was to gain a $13 billion win against Big Tobacco. And I guess that was the David versus Goliath, because in the United States history, the elusive tobacco industry had been like vapor, trying to grab it. And this firm was the first to knock down a domino that successive states began to win lawsuits. And I really was hurt, no offense to you or anything, but in my references of this firm and its experience of winning the first major tobacco settlement for a state such as Florida, that they received a 0 for their staff experience in similar projects. I still have not reconciled their 0. When I looked at the scoring over the weekend and looked at it close, I recognized that the Parks group was like miles in front of everybody else, and I thought I didn't even pay much attention, except for when I looked at the scores, there are only 2 zeros out of all scoring categories for everybody, only 2 zeros. And that the Farnville group, for similar experience in similar projects, hell, they should have got a 12 for similar experience, because they have actually taken down Big Tobacco, and these other firms ain't took nobody of this magnitude down.
Fred Levin,
Huh?
was Farnville's partner in the tobacco lawsuit, so they both do have experience in that tobacco lawsuit.
Okay, but in these other groups, in any of those giants in this group, David?
Levin.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, cool. Stand corrected. We noted that at that time, that these guys beat Big Tobacco was just humongous. And if this other guy, who was an even Steven partner, got points, why in the hell didn't the other guy get some points as well? One can't be as good as the other if they equal even Steven partners. I don't get that. So I'm really more complex now that one is credited and the others are discredited with a 0. So as has been pointed out, this is not a formal protest, and had they, Mr. Bishop had indicated a formal protest, I may have seconded your motion, but I think that what they've come to do is to scorch our consciences, to be aware of processes in the future. And no doubt about it, you think that this is, you want Michael Jordan drafted number one, or you want LeBron James. I mean, these firms are scaled at that height and level. I believe that on the issue of a paper ballot, which came up some years ago, county attorney, I can't tell you how to do your job, but it typically is in vending areas of public bidding that we do have scores kept. And I remember years ago when Ion Sancho thought that we should have a paper trail for ballots that were cast. And I remember one time I won an election one night by 12 votes, and they had to recount paper the next day. And I picked up, thank God, 3 more votes. One for the Father, one for the Son, and one was for the Holy Ghost. So I was grateful for that. But had there not been any paper, you know, that great trilogy may not have come together behind me. And I just think that in the future, because these guys have credibility, credence, and track records of success of headbanging in law that is well noted and distinguished. And I think that when we're handling this, not a local rooster fight company outfit, this is an opioid case, and we're holding pharmaceutical accountable, and we have to, as was pointed out by both Commissioners Deloge and Daley, that we have to exercise processes that are really rigorous and exacting in these situations. And oftentimes, Ms. Bishop, to look at issues like this, when y'all got beat down by 20 points, you know, and I wasn't in the room, and that don't look good on paper. It just hurts, you know, just to think somebody. But I disagree, and I will go to the grave, to my grave tonight. I don't perceive Fonville as being ranked as a 0 in their experience in similar projects. So that being said, I yield the floor to the chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. You must have said something, because I got Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Loge, Commissioner Dozier, and the Vice Chair in queue to speak. And I have no motion. Commissioner Lindley.
I'd like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation, and largely on the basis of, thank you. The words, I mean, I understand your issues to some extent, but honestly, the ambiguity, what is the staff? Is it the higher echelon attorneys, or is it the person who gets the coffee? Staff is a vague word. References, you know, are they verbal? Are they solicited? Are they offered? I just don't want to be in the position of second guessing our legal office, the process that we have found to be useful and full of integrity for many, many years. Technical competence, you know, that could mean 1,000 things. So I'm just qualifications of legal team. Again, I mean, to me, you all have examined these, so you do know specifically what the qualifications are, what the technical competence actually entails and requires. What is the staff? What parts of the staff are we talking about? They may not have even been around during the tobacco settlement, this particular staff. So for me, it would just be saying, flip a coin, you know, I like your words better than the others. I'm trusting our county attorney's office, and I hope we can support the staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation been moved by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. I now have Commissioner Deloge, Commissioner Dozier, and Vice Chair Jackson in queue to speak. Commissioner Deloge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Barney, thanks for coming in, and I appreciate your comments. I mean, it's hard as a non-lawyer to get in the middle of lawyers evaluating lawyers, and I'm the one who brought this up a couple of months ago, and when the question was asked specifically, did we want Herb to choose or did we want Herb to go to an RFP, we all kind of said in abundance of caution, let's go to the RFP, because the reality is I'm not in a position to be choosing, and I'm kind of looking to him to make that decision. Now, clearly, there's some differences about how this could have been done, and I think we should take that to heart, but to start all over again every time, it creates nothing but chaos in my mind. There's a process. I think we honor it to some degree, but really appreciate Barney coming in and making the comments he did. I mean, you win some, you lose some, but if you just let it lie and don't say anything about it, then you never make any changes. So I'm fine with going forward with the motion out of respect for the process, and that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Dozier and Vice Chair Jackson. Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had gotten in the queue earlier when Commissioner Daly made your motion. Having served on committees before that review bids and submitted bids, there are times when I've seen, and I'm not judging this on this review process, but you have to look at the information in front of you. I've been on review committees with property manager groups, and I know something about the organization, but it's not in the documents in front of me. And I mean, there is, I think Commissioner Lindley was getting to this point. I use that as an example because of 2 reasons. One, the cost to put together a bid like this is substantial, whether it's construction or legal or anything like that. And I am not prepared to re-advertise this without, if you had gotten a second to the motion, without taking another step if we needed more information from the county attorney's office about the process to at least go, and we just got this list to my mind today. I only heard about it yesterday, so we would need some time to be able to answer each of these questions. However, given the motion that's on the table, the answers that have been given, this is a more subjective process than a hard bid, and I have to trust that process, acknowledging that we have to also have this conversation every time any questions are raised. So I appreciate you coming forward and asking that. The last thing I'll say is, Commissioner Daly, I think, yes, at this time there's particular scrutiny on any type of local government process. But I'm going to go on a limb and say when we have had issues, we deal with them. Maybe there's a protest, maybe there's not. I mean, on a rare occasion, but we've not had major issues that many others have because we have always been attentive to these details. At least, I mean, in all the time I've been here, and I think all the time you all have been here, and I'm proud of that. So I just didn't want to leave that hanging. I don't think that's what you intended, but we are always careful, and I think your point was now is no exception, but I do trust that we most often get it right, and when we get it wrong, we acknowledge it and work on it. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'll be redundant, Kristen. Thank you for saying what I was going to say. But Commissioner Daly, you bring up a good point, and it's more important than ever that we maintain character from this board, and we maintain transparency in decision-making, because, as you know, when you start to lose character and you start to lose transparency, you start to lose trust, and that's important. And then secondly, speaking for Mr. Messer and his firm as well, I know that his character is one that I don't question, and he's an old friend from way back, and I appreciate them coming today to bring our attention to this. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Immediate Past.
Yeah, just to wrap up real quick, I'm going to respectfully vote against the motion on the table because I do think the process was flawed. And remind me, Mr. Attorney, what is what can we expect if there is an actual bid protest to this? How do we move forward from here?
It would go through the purchasing process to be assigned to a special master or a committee. There are procedures to do that. So no contract would be signed then until that was resolved.
How long does that process take?
A month.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is it too late for a protest to occur?
Yes.
Any more questions? Motion on the floor is for staff recommendation. Motion made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries 6-1. We'll move on now to item number 20.
Commissioners, item number 20 seeks your consideration of full board appointments to 3 entities. Eligible applicants for the respective entities are included in page 2 of this item, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, Commissioner Daly?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a recommendation for option 1 and option number 2, but for option number 3A, I would like to recommend Mr. Robert Volpe for the Planning Commission seat.
I second that.
Motion been made by Commissioner Daly.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
If, Mary Ann, Commissioner, if you don't mind, option 3B is a reauthorization as well. So why don't, if you don't mind, the option would be for option 3A, Mr. Robert Volpe, and option 3B, as recommended.
Second that.
Motion been made by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. All those in favor of the motion, please.
Chairman, a point of unreadiness.
Yes, ma'am.
May I just make a comment real quick
Do what you
before you
gotta do.
vote? Thank you. It is typical, first one in, and Mr. Volpe is immensely qualified for this board. Qualifications, we had this conversation earlier, do weigh heavily on my mind, even when we consider diversity. But Mr. County Administrator, I believe there are no other women on the Planning Commission. Is that correct? Other than Diane, I'm sorry, is there one other?
Martha Chauncey is up for
School board appointment.
That's
the school board.
That's a school board position, but of county or city appointments. I'm just curious if that is an issue we want to consider. I believe Ms. Williams-Cox was the only one, and there are two other experienced candidates. I will support Mr. Volpe for sure. He was one of my top two choices. I just do feel like that diversity of perspective is important, and we just had a long discussion about it earlier, so I just wanted to mention it. Now and in the future on committees, I think it is important for us to look at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Partner.
Mr. Chairman, I some months ago nominated Diane Williams-Cox specifically for the reasons referenced by Commissioner Dozier, and that is that a planning commission ought to be balanced. We don't have requirements or restrictions to every area geographic of our community serving. Thus, by our trotting over the sitting commissioner planning commissioner who desires to continue to serve would absolutely thwart the diversity question on the planning commission, which I'm willing still singularly at times to lift it up, but I'm glad that Commissioner Dozier is lifting it up from a gender perspective, and I respect gender as well as diversity of race and all of those things. Diane Cox Williams happens, perchance, to live right there near the roundabout of Rickards. And as we talk about the Orange Avenue corridor, the dimensions of development there, it's an important emerging street, Barack Obama Boulevard. And I think that as we think about that part of the world, we need to continue to have her voice, and someone from that segment of the world. It's no different than the quest. I saw the Chamber of Commerce recently, who got a really a wonderful blue ribbon panel together, but it was really an outstanding panel. It just didn't have nobody except blue ribbon people, and I think that the planning commission deserves to have people who may not be as distinguished as Mr. Volpe. I mean, not taking anything away from him, I just think that it adds velocity to consideration of the Planning Commission to have persons who may have even less credentials than his. So I would offer a substitute motion on that rationale that we keep the balance that we now have and not run over someone willing, able, has announced. Now, I expect that if Commissioner Cox Williams is to win the city commission seat, she's going to relinquish that, and this post will come open on August 28th or November. But until then, she may not win that seat. I don't know. We would keep her there. So I offer substitute motion for Diane Cox Williams to remain on the Planning Commission.
Substitute motion for Diane Williams-Cox has been put forward by Commissioner Proctor. Is there a second to that motion? I'll second that motion.
On point, Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I should have been more specific. I appreciate Diane Williams-Cox's service on the commission. I am not inclined to think we should have candidates on the commission, and I also have come to really think more critically about the experience that people bring to the commission. And Danielle Irwin was the candidate that I had in my mind. To not belabor this point, again, I just wanted to mention the issue of diversity on our boards, because if we want that in our organization, it is throughout the whole time. I will support the original motion, but I cannot support the substitute motion at this time. So I just wanted to make that point clear. The skill set does matter as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of information for the board, can I ask the county attorney, is there any restriction besides the thoughts of Commissioner Dozier's own mind that prohibits a person who happens to be a candidate from being on the planning commission? Or do we have any rule against that?
Once elected, that would be dual office holding, and she would have to resign. But no, not in the running.
Okay, very good. I want to be clear.
You know, Commissioner Proctor, my second was based off the fact that we have a person who's sitting in that seat that's doing a good job, that wants to be reappointed to that seat, and I've always seek to give those opportunities who want to be reappointed. But the more I think about it, she is a sitting candidate, and she does have an opportunity to win that seat. And we had be sitting right here again, having to have the same conversation. And based off of that, I hate to do it, but I'm going to rescind my second. I do think she's very capable. I would love to see her stay in that seat, but at the same time, her being a candidate puts that seat in risk of being reappointed. So
we don't have the rule against her serving. The county attorney just said that we don't have any restrictions against that.
We don't have any restrictions, but maybe we should. All those in favor of the motion on the floor for option 3A, which 3B, I believe, which is Robert Volpe, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1. We'll move now to other nominations. I believe we have a couple more seats. Architectural Board. Any nominations?
I nominate Elizabeth Crawford. I think Rhonda Hammond is the only eligible one for the second seat, and Peter Kudrowski. I nominated Elizabeth Crawford, Rhonda Hammond, and Peter Kudrowski. That would be options 1A, Elizabeth Crawford, and 1B and C, which are the eligible applicants.
Thank you. Motion been made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And we just
7-0.
I make a motion for Holly Henderson for option 2 for the Career Source Capital Region Board.
Motion been made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Dozier to reappoint Holly Henderson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. Commissioners, we got 15 minutes. We are due for a public hearing at 6 o'clock. Thank you.